As a young boy, I always had a strong belief in God, but I didn't actually realise God till I was at the age of 23. As a young boy in Australia at the time, I grew up under the Western structures of the Christian faith, but my family was not heavily influenced by the tradition or dogma of Christianity, and we did not even attend a regular church service, only the Christmas Mass service, which even then was rare for us. In a way, I was rather fortunate not to be confined and restricted to the traditions or dogma of any one particular faith, for it allowed me to freely investigate and develop my own understanding and belief in God through my own young capacity, experience and insights. However, the accuracy of my personalised adolescent beliefs and opinions would not be realised, clarified and corrected until I hit my early 20s. As a young boy before my teenage years, I was very happy, open, carefree and outgoing. But then in my teenage years, I became rather quiet and introspective, and very much a contemplative individual. However, when I turned 20, I encountered a very traumatic situation in my life regarding my college school sweetheart, which took a turn upon me for the worst. Too much to bear, I tragically suffered from a mental breakdown, being diagnosed with an episode of schizophrenia. At the time, stress gave way to anxiety, anxiety gave way to paranoia, and paranoia then tragically gave way to a horrific fall into a catatonic state of psychosis. It was an extremely uncomfortable, hellful time for me, and although at the time I did not know that I was suffering from the illness called schizophrenia, I definitely knew right from the very start that something was seriously wrong with me, and this was not who I was supposed to be. At the time I experienced schizophrenia, psychosis, for about 3 weeks, with a climax period featuring audio hallucinations, lasting for about half a day, and this till date has been the only time of any such hallucinations. It took a good 10 months to recover from this initial episode, during which time depression heavily featured before finding my foundations again. Since that initializing experience, I have encountered another 3 mild relapses, lasting no longer than 2 to 3 weeks for each. And these brief encounters featured very scary associations and ideas of reference. Once recovered from that initial nightmare state in my life, I began to seriously question how and why the mind can act in such a devastating, destructive way. And I also began to develop a tenacious pursuit to understand what really is consciousness. Fortunately for me, my initial psychiatrist at the time specialised in transpersonal psychology, having also had association with the School of Philosophy for many years. I would visit my doctor every Thursday afternoon, and instead of being counselled, we would freely and eagerly discuss topics on the nature of consciousness. I even remember how our very first conversation started, with me asking him, is consciousness produced from the brain, or does the brain just house it for use and operation? And from there, my real spiritual journey began. During this time, my doctor gave me a copy of the Bhagavad Gita for my birthday, the very beautiful navy blue 2-volume commentary translation by Paramahansa Yogananda, and I couldn't put it down. From reading these Eastern scriptures under Yogananda's translation, I began to develop a clearer understanding and appreciation for Western scripture, particularly the pure essence of the Christian faith. So as the weeks passed, from reading the scriptures and my very eager attendance with my doctor each week, my awareness was becoming more and more in awe of the greater reality to existence that was being confided in me. Not only was I feeling great joy from such discussions, so was my doctor. I had very much fallen deeply in love with the nature of God and God itself. Then one day, a few months later, it all came to a mess, when I was struck, totally out of the blue, with a very brief yet very intense experience of non-duality, lasting for about 10 seconds in relative calculation. Within that time, I felt, and I stress the word felt, no difference between my immediate self and everything else around and beyond me. The difference between here and there had gone. It was as if my individual boundaries had been lost and nothing distinguished me from all else. It all happened when I was attending to my usual training at the local gym. Resting between a set of exercises, I stood there, paused in silence, breathing deeply and smoothly, coming to a complete halt. Looking up slightly, I became stilled in myself, and in that moment the gym all of a sudden became quiet to me, and I felt myself go. I began to feel my identity larger than my body, larger than my individuality. My boundaries of personality instantly gave way, dissolved, and I felt myself expanding to a point of about 20 feet out into and merging with everything around me. The difference between myself and the surrounding area, including people, was losing distinction and difference, and I was continuing to expand further out at an immediate rate, equally in all directions everywhere. Distance was being overcome as if it was all part of my own body. Fully conscious throughout the entire episode, it was an enormous shock going from the transition of usual everyday relativity to the boundless, from one extreme to the other, within the space of seconds. Not knowing how far I was going to go out into everything, or even if I would return to my individuality for that matter, I was becoming a little scared, at which point I, my individual ego, therefore caught myself back in fear of the unknown. Although I had lost myself relatively at this point, I was still able to call to myself from in my mind, "Come back, come back!" And in that asking, I did so without any conscious effort on my behalf. If there is one thing that ego cannot contend with, it is losing its boundaries of definition and distinction. The experience was very brief, yet immeasurably intense, having only lasted for about 5 to 10 seconds, after which I returned to my usual, everyday individuality again, of relative dualistic nature, with no side effects except for that of extreme awe, wonder and curiosity. Never before in all my life had I ever experienced such, and because it was so alien to my experience up to that point in my life, at the time I thought I was having a heart attack. This was my very first encounter of my subjective being becoming boundless and merging back into the greater subjective being of all reality in total. My experience also confirmed very directly for me what my doctor and myself had been discussing all along, and certainly answered my very first question that began my spiritual journey in the first place. That the brain merely houses, or rather focuses consciousness for individual use and operation. That consciousness itself is subjective not only to individuality, but also equally to all manifest objective reality, even behind and beyond the brain's neurological functions and operation. All reality, in fact, is a product, expression of consciousness. When it comes to explaining my experience, the classic analogy that comes to mind is the individual wave merging back into the ocean. It is rather interesting to note that quantum physics also verifies consciousness as the basis and foundation of all reality, not only from the reference point of individual observation, but from all places everywhere, within, throughout and beyond everything. And my experience definitely revealed to me that is so. What has been accounted for by indirect scientific means was revealed to me directly and personally, and what I experienced directly has been accounted for throughout the ages, throughout all world scripture and spiritual traditions. As it is written, "For in that we live and move and have our being." You may be thinking that the gym, of all places, is a very strange place to encounter God, and I know that there are many immature spiritual seekers out there who are under the impression, or rather misconception, that you can only receive mystic union in the appropriate places, such as the natural environment, in a rainforest or on a mountain top. These locations certainly set the mood for allowing the divine to come upon us, but as God is everywhere, there is no location of preference where mystic union is to be experienced. And I do feel that it was because of my immense, intense love for God at the time that allowed grace to do its work and to take place for God to come upon me in such an unorthodox situation, which was very much appropriate to my situation and lifestyle at the time. I was 23 when I encountered this initial mystic experience, and it has forever changed my orientation on life. Ever since that time, I've developed an undying passion for anything authentically transpersonal, and to share such sacred knowledge and wisdom for the benefit of others. And if it were not for this genuine encounter with the mystical, I do not believe I would have had the insight to recover to the extent of full recovery from the illness that relapsed another 3 times further down the track in my later 20s. Yes, I had the aid of medication to assist in recovery, but such gross biochemical material means only played a very small role in my recovery. If it was not for my own overpowering will and desire to want to get better, I would have never had reclaimed my original identity and well-being again. I would have just been a stunned mullet with chemical reactions trying to rebalance my brain chemistry. Coming into contact with the subjective nature of reality has allowed me the flexibility to ground my attention in that field, and to step back from the mind and simply observe the fleeting nature of not only my mind, but all aspects of manifest objective reality, the emotions, the body, and the exterior environment around me. Now today, 7 years down the track since my last episode, I have no relapse traces of the illness whatsoever, and in myself I'm just as healthy and normal as I was before the illness ever came upon me. And still to this day I have yet to come across someone who has recovered to the full extent I have, and further gone on to realize and experience firsthand the ultimate nature of reality. Without a doubt there has to be people out there who have achieved such, but as yet I have not come across them. Yet having boldly said that, there is no 100% guarantee that I will never encounter another relapse again in my life. But with everything I have gained from my 10 years of experience, both mentally and spiritually, I now have substantial tools and armour to prevent such again, and I will do everything in my good power to continue to do so. For the doubting Thomases out there who may still be questioning the authenticity of my mystic experience, I'd like to let you know that it occurred quite naturally during normal regular health, and was not a result of the symptoms of the schizophrenia illness, hallucinations, delusions, grandiose religious identifications known as the Jesus syndrome, or special narcissistic importance. As false as this experience may appear to immediate material and lay speculation, I have 2 very competent and reliable doctors who specialize in such unique cases as mine and can vouch for my authenticity and credibility in such. Since recovering from the illness and from that very revealing experience, I now have far greater insight into the subtle aspects of mind and consciousness. And since my recoveries, due to my own curiosity, I have researched much literature into this area of psychology. Reading about such has only confirmed that which I knew to be true all along, even when I was sick, that we are not the illness we suffer from. What we are, most importantly, beyond our personality and individuality, ego, is that which is the same in all of us. We are all the same in essence, we are all human beings, and our primary nature and essence is never in any way separate from the source of all life, no matter how far away or blind to it we are. No matter what illness we encounter in life, whether mental, emotional or physical, it can in no way damage or corrupt our deeper subjective self, or ultimately deprive us of experiencing and realizing that greater true aspect of ourself and reality in total. From my encounter with the greater nature of reality, I have found that a true mystic experience is non-prejudice and non-preferential, and is open and available to anyone, regardless of illness, disability, race, age, gender, sexuality, intelligence, education, qualifications, experience, position, status, wealth, recognition, refinement, realization, and even religious preference for that matter. As the Creator is everywhere, it pervades and saturates the entire universe. Therefore, not only does God exist beyond us, He also exists within us at the same time. That being so is the very reason why such a spiritual unified experience with all reality is possible to all of us, when we truly desire to seek it out. It is the very and always presence of God which is the underlying conscious unity and maker throughout all the universe and infinitely beyond. As Western scripture confirms, the kingdom of God is within you, and is also spread upon the face of the earth, yet men see it not. As commonly as spiritual and religious delusion is associated with mental illness, this does not in any way whatsoever take away from the ultimate reality that even the hell of schizophrenia cannot deprive us from our spiritual essence and source that is always there, true, pure and free, behind and beyond all the fleeting turmoil observed and experienced at the level of mind. And nor does it take away from the full possibility of a person who encounters mental illness to be just as much open to encounter a genuine, authentic, spiritual or mystic experience as anyone else may. It may be harder to authenticate given the circumstances, but no less possible. After my initial teaser experience with God, as I like to call it, I was then prepared to encounter the big one, awaiting me a few months down the track in mid-April of 1996, just before Easter and Passover, a very, very dark night of the soul experience. At the time, my awareness was becoming so full of love for God, due to my energy, closeness and realization of its reality opening up to me. During a film shoot on Bayview Golf Course here on the northern beaches of Sydney, Australia, I was working with a film crew of 3 men and another actor as my counterpart. About midday, with not a cloud in the sky, I had a very emotional reaction to the situation around me. I indirectly revealed my heart's most deepest and cherished desire to the director. Instantly exposed and completely overwhelmed by the feeling, I collapsed flat on my back in total surrender with my arms stretched out, as if I was overpowered by some supernatural force coming upon me. In that moment, I felt totally, completely naked, and suddenly my life experience and all my human ignorance was being recalled and accounted for upon my human awareness. It was truly horrific and felt terrible, because as I laid there, it felt like all my hidden and dark self was being involuntarily released out into the open light of day. I was hurting deeply, and I had absolutely no conscious control over the ordeal. I just had to go with it. It made me feel very naked and exposed to everything, and I was feeling terrible shame and guilt upon my conscience. Once that level of the recall had passed, I then felt the total reverse. The ignorance of humanity and its influence and impact upon my individual being. This was truly horrific and the most intense agony I've ever felt in all my life. I guess God wanted to show me a bit of perspective there, to show me that I'm not the only one. Once that was finished, I then began to recall all the lives of everyone with and before mine. I was not just witnessing them, I was them. Everyone, good and bad. My subjectivity had merged with the collective of everyone, and I was feeling it all, right back to the beginning of time. Going through the recall of all life was extremely agonizing, because I was mostly bombarded and impacted by the suffering and ignorance of humanity in totality. There was nothing wrong with the well and harmonious, that was not fazing me, but the darker side of nature did cause me terrible distress and agony. The recall of all life I had just experienced was not an ethereal visualization as what is usually accounted for in such spiritual phenomena, but rather I felt it all upon my being. There was no interior visual association with the recall experience, and I believe it was so intense because of the short time frame it took to recall it all collectively there and then. Once I'd reached the beginning of time, I then felt the karma of future actions to be due to our actions now. This was rather peculiar. Although I could feel the result of the future actions, I had no idea what that was, for it had not arrived in the window of the present yet. But it all felt just as painful as all the rest. The agony experience came to an end with my awareness feeling the entire play of creation in totality, the good, the bad, the mixed, past, present and future, all in one, cover to cover. It was at this absolute point that I then came back to the relativity of my bodily senses again, to notice myself dramatically trying to get up from the fairway on the golf course. I've always wondered how long I was lying there during the ordeal. For the rest of the afternoon I was trying to recover from the terrible agony and anguish which I was still experiencing there before the three men and my fellow actor, and no matter how hard I tried, it just would not go away. But about an hour or so later, I was then suddenly and instantly engulfed, from completely out of nowhere, by the most beautiful blissful sensation that I can only describe as feeling like an enormous wave of pure love, so potent and powerful that it completely saturated my entire being. Within the limits of my body, it made me feel completely open and exposed, but now with nothing to hide or to be ashamed or guilty of whatsoever. I was so naked and exposed to it, it was incredible. The feeling and quality of the experience was full of absolute truth, as if clear enough for all eternity to witness. And it was a feeling of like being totally clean, fresh and free, totally completely free from any judgment whatsoever. It felt like pure unconditional love. The love made everything so clean and clear that it felt like truth and myself were not separate. In the moment of feeling that, both truth and love were felt to be exactly the same quality, as if the two were one. And I remember standing there in awe with this still perplexed look upon my face, trying to make some sort of sense of the immense profundity of the feeling that was upon me there and then. Although the feeling was very profound and definite upon myself, I could not grasp or capture the immensity of it in any intellectual way with my mind. Although I was totally exposed in that moment, I felt total comfort and acceptance by a presence far greater than anything imaginable. In a way, I felt as if Adam and Eve did before they ate from the tree of knowledge and became ashamed of their nakedness. It felt as if I had stripped the ego veil they had covered their souls with, the one that was the cause of mankind's separation from everything and everyone, including God. The love I was feeling there and then was far greater than any expressed love I've ever experienced in all my life. The moment would have only lasted for about 10 seconds, and then it was gone. A couple of weeks later, when I had fully recovered from the aftermath of this very intense dark night of the soul, I very much indeed felt like an immense cleansing and purification had taken place. And as much as the term is misrepresented, misunderstood by various religious institutions, I literally felt reborn. A year or so later, after much contemplation for doing so, I finally decided to document my extraordinary encounters with the divine in an autobiographical screenplay trilogy, which I appropriately called Willpower, telling of my overcoming of the illness, the dark side of nature, my spiritual journey, and going on to realise the ultimate nature of reality, which finally leads the hero to experience universality as the climatic high note to end the trilogy. Regarding my agony experience, I also began to deeply appreciate and empathise with what was written in the scriptures about Jesus of Nazareth during his time of the Passion. Around this time I received an insight about such, and I wrote it down in literal format as a short passage. It goes as such. Take a moment to reflect upon the pains you have encountered on your travels so far. Then add to that the pains you have yet to encounter till the end of this current life of yours. Then add to that the same for all the lives that are currently at the present now. Then add to that the same for all the lives that have gone before yours. Then add to that the same for all the lives that will be after yours currently. And if then your mind can possibly or even remotely fathom such a unified degree of pain and suffering, you will know what Christ Jesus felt in his agony in the garden. Thus was his passion for humanity. Opened up to such a boundless, absolute extent at that time in my early 20s, I have gained a profoundly strong intuitive sense about reality and the disposition of others. And as a result from that, a tenacious pursuit has flourished to share and express knowledge and wisdom in the fields of transpersonal psychology and mystic philosophy, complementing both Eastern and Western traditions alike. Since that life-changing experience back in early 1996, I have been very fortunate to gain unmediated insight and wisdom about the divine. And although I do not meditate to maintain my awareness about God, my being has naturally maintained its awareness about that, and in many ways has continued to increase and become more refined over the years in appreciation and understanding the nature and way of the Absolute. As such, I have unswervingly maintained an undying devotion and passion to continue writing literature about anything truly authentically spiritual and transpersonal, and convey it in the most simple, clear, precise, and understandable way possible. And just recently, which was a wonderful surprise for me, I have been extremely fortunate to have one of my conference papers passed on to my lifetime hero and aspiration, Steven Spielberg. Because of my unmediated access to knowledge about such things, I do not read as much as I used to, which has now been substituted by my own desire to get the word out. However, when I do have a read, it is usually of my favourite writer and good friend, Brother Wayne Teasdale. I absolutely love his book, The Mystic Heart. It's my favourite. Having come into direct contact with the divine, it has made me understand that all religions have their value, and it is not the case that each religion worships their own unique God, but rather every religion worships the one and same Creator, divine ultimate reality, according to how the cultures of those particular faiths have been influenced by the founding sages and prophets who encountered the divine directly, which ultimately led to their following and teachings about that. What the Christians call God, the Hindus call Brahman. What the Buddhists call the foundation ground of being, the Taoists call the Tao. What the Jews call Yahweh, the Muslims call Allah. What the American Indians call the Great Spirit, the Aborigines also call it the same. No matter what our degree of perception may be, whether delusional, accurate or refined, it does not change the ultimate fact that we all exist in the same reality, being on the same planet and in the same universe. As such, it only seems complementary and natural that there is only one divine absolute reality governing it all, no matter where we are located or what path on the map we use to navigate our way back to the ultimate treasure of all life. For me, as a young mystic, I'd love to see all religions united in a universal spiritual understanding and appreciation that we all exist and share in the same reality, no matter what path on the map we choose to discover and reach the goal of salvation. As long as we are going in the right direction and we follow the paths, the faiths, accurately, free from manipulation and extremism, we are on the right track. However, for me personally, due to the influences and experiences in the life of this current incarnation of mine so far, Christianity and Hinduism have had the most profound impacts upon myself so far. With absolute respect to all the faiths, Jesus of Nazareth will remain to be my most favourite mystic sage of all the traditions. However, for me now, I would like to look into the spiritual faith of Judaism more, particularly the pure mystical texts and scriptures of the faith. Before I finish up, I would like to leave you with a bit of practical advice for those of you out there who are sincerely wanting to discover the secrets and mysteries to life that we all seem to ask ourselves at some stage, but sometimes find too hard to pursue and take upon ourselves. To allow the realization of God to come into your life, my only advice would be this: develop an intense passion and love for God. The journey always starts with us questioning reality and what makes life so, and when you do come to some understanding and discover the existence of what makes life so, you will become so overwhelmed and relieved that you will literally fall in love with your ultimate identity and connection with the Absolute. If you truly discover the existence of God, you cannot help but falling in love with its nature, its divine reality and presence that constitutes us all. You may meditate all your life for self-realization, but if you have love for God first and foremost above all else, that love is like an arrow heading straight for the target, and the journey to mystic union will be quickened manyfold faster than what years of meditation could achieve. Meditation clears the mind to find God. Love purifies the heart to reach God. And to be sure, the heart is far closer to God than what the mind is. I certainly do not in any way advocate that meditation is a poor method to reach the divine, but there is a faster, easier, more passionate way to reach God. Just fall in love with your ultimate nature and home place that is always there waiting for you. And in that first initial moment when you do truly come into some genuine understanding of its reality being so, that passion and yearning will no doubt occur for you. And when that spark happens for you, it will spur you on to come into the experience of greater flames of understanding and realization. If I had to choose between meditation or love to reach God, I would choose love. And that would be the only advice I would give here to achieve that. Develop an unswerving love for life itself, for then you will be fully open to receive everything. That does not mean you go around in superficial hysterics, hugging trees and kissing everyone in sight, or dancing around in some deluded state of artificial bliss. No, it is a blissful love, but one that is of deep yearning, kept in humility and just temperament in the depths of our heart. It is a self-disciplined and controlled love, directed solely by the passion of our being to understand and discover the mysteries of life and what makes it all so. Love for wanting to understand life and the Creator was the path I fell for, so I can only offer and encourage by my own example and experience. So above all else, that would be my only advice, to encourage you to develop an undying passion, yearning, and love for life and the divine. For then it will allow for grace to take over and to come upon you with the ultimate gift of union with God. And as a result from that union, you will receive the after gifts of realizing the nature of its reality and our connection with it that has always been and always will be. And from my own experience, I can tell you that that intuitive connection with God will allow you, at any time when you're inclined to retrieve such, that mystic connection will allow you unmediated access to knowledge about the mysteries to all life, the universe, and the Absolute itself. So to close, I thought it would be nice to share with you a few of my spiritual passages to reflect upon. What is God? God is the absolute boundless presence that pervades, creates, sustains, and retrieves all levels of manifest reality. God the Absolute. I am absolute. When the gap is bridged, the barrier dissolved between observer and observed, there will be no difference, and you will know me and be as I am. Absolute, beyond separation and duality. This is my truest nature, all as and in one. Unity. Amongst all our variety and differences, we are all founded in unity. We are all the same, we are all human beings, we are all one. We all live on the same planet, in the same star system, the same galaxy, the same universe, the same creation, the same spirit, the same light of consciousness, the same Creator. We are all the same, we are all one. The One. And the final verse goes as such. In the realm of the Absolute, everything is subjective. God be with you all.